Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you'll give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, have a seat talking to the microphone. Thank you. Would you like some water, sir?
I would, please.
Okay, thank you. Looks like Brian's going to get it.
Give me just one moment to swap out my notes. State your full name for the record, please.
David John Halls.
Mr. Halls, what do you do for a living?
I am retired. I was a first assistant director on motion pictures and television programs.
How long were you a first assistant director?
Since the mid-90s, I think we could probably use, for motion pictures, 94, since 1994.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you to move that microphone a little closer to you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And in October of 2021, were you employed on the set of the movie Rust?
I was.
And were you employed in that capacity as a first assistant director?
I was.
Can you explain to the jurors what a first assistant director does?
A first assistant director is responsible for creating the schedule. First assistant director will do that in collaboration with the director and producers. That's a process of taking the script and breaking it down, and what actors are going to be needed in which scenes, what props are going to be needed, what pieces of wardrobe are going to be needed, what special effects will be needed. And that is all broken down into a software program that's pretty universal in the industry. And that generates documents that can be distributed to the different departments, the different department heads. And my department, the first assistant, the assistant director's department, is kind of a contact point for the cast. So it's really a position of disseminating information. This is all during the pre-production process. And then once production shooting begins, the first assistant director would be, an analogy would be you're the shop foreman or the site foreman. You're overseeing and making sure that the production is following the schedule, that things are moving efficiently, and that people are given, the cast crew are given the information that they need to know.
And sir, as the first assistant director on the set of Rust, were you what's called a safety coordinator?
Yes, that is part of my title, yes.
And what do you do as a safety coordinator?
It's to make sure that the different departments and cast are following the safety protocols. That there are written safety protocols that are produced in an alliance between the different unions and guilds in the industry, Screen Actors Guild, the unions that represent the technicians, and it's just to observe to make sure that mitigating any safety risks.
Did you feel personally, up until October 21st, that Rust was a relatively safe set?
I did.
Did you yourself have any concerns about Ms. Gutierrez's behavior as an armorer?
I did not.
And is part of your role as the first assistant director to be a part of the safety check of firearms that's taking place on set?
Yes.
Can you just describe for the jury generally the way that should work?
Yeah. I was going to say typically, but usually, all the time, whenever there's a firearm on set. I do not work with a lot of first assistant directors, but I am assured that this is a protocol that all assistant directors follow. That whenever a firearm is on set, I make an announcement. In the case of Rust, I had a wireless microphone that was connected to a public address, a speaker system, so everybody could hear. And all the time, whenever there was a firearm on set, I would make an announcement there was a firearm or firearms on set. I'm inspecting them with the armorer. If anybody else would like to inspect the gun, now would be the time. And you're certainly welcome to do that. I would also, if there was ever an incident where the firearm had to be fired, a blank, I would make that announcement. There will be live fire in this shot. Ear and eye protection are provided. Please protect your ears.
On the set of Rust, can you tell the jury what the safety checks with Ms. Gutierrez consisted of?
It's really what I just said. That whenever.
And let me stop you and
yes.
ask a more pointed question. I guess what I'm interested in is, did Ms. Gutierrez load the gun in front of you on any occasion? Just kind of walk us through your experiences with blanks, with dummies, with Ms. Gutierrez, and let's, for the purposes of these questions, let's assume that there's going to be blank firing. Okay.
Yes.
We assume there's going to be blank firing. Prior to handing the gun to an actor, is there a safety check that is done with you and Ms. Gutierrez?
Yes. She showed me that there's an empty gun at that moment before she would load the blank round. She would also show me the barrel of the gun to make sure that there's no obstructions in the barrel.
So let me ask you, when she would show you the barrel, were you able to see all the way down the barrel?
On the revolvers, yes, I certainly was. I recall there might have been a rifle that I might not have been able to get a clear to see light at the end of the barrel.
Okay, so she loads the gun with the blanks in front of you. Is that right?
Yes.
And then what happens then?
And then she would give it to the actor.
And was it, in your mind, permissible for her to then walk away and go do something else?
During the moments of the live fire?
Sure.
No, not acceptable for her to walk away.
Okay. Let's talk about instances where a gun would be loaded with dummies.
Yes.
When you would do the safety check with Ms. Gutierrez, would she load the dummies in front of you and shake them so that you could hear that they were dummies?
There were only 2 occasions where dummy rounds were used.
Let me stop you right there. When you say there were only 2 occasions that dummy rounds were used, how do you know that dummies were in the guns on those 2 occasions? Is it because Ms. Gutierrez approached you and told you?
She did.
Okay. Would you know if there were times that she would dummy up the guns and not bring them to you and not tell you?
No, the normal, every day, every moment that there was a firearm that was being handed to an actor, she would always bring the gun, the firearm to me, and we would do an inspection of the firearm.
And you only recall 2 instances where firearms were dummied.
Yes.
And was one of them on October 21st?
Yes.
And the other one, did that involve a revolver or a long gun?
A long gun.
Okay. So let's talk about October 21st. I'm going to start with you after the lunch hour. What was happening after lunch? What were we doing there?
We were preparing a shot for Mr. Baldwin's character. He was sitting in a pew. He's been on the run. He's taking refuge in this old church, and he's sitting in the pew. And what we were photographing. I'm sorry. I'm trying to avoid the word shot. We were preparing for this shot of Mr. Baldwin sitting in the pew. It was basically from his waist to the top of his head, and his action was just to pull out the revolver. And in the story, he's pointing the revolver at 2 U.S. Marshals that have come into the church.
Okay. That was what you were intending to do?
That's what we were preparing to, yes, lighting, yes.
And this has been referred to as blocking the shot. Is that your recollection?
You could refer to that. You could say that, yes. Can I just, there's been a lot of talk about rehearsal, and I just like to clarify, if that's okay with you.
Let's finish this line of questioning first, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, was this a rehearsal, or was it just setting up the shot?
Immediately after lunch, we were setting up the shot. Mr. Baldwin was not called to set.
And is that common that was Mr. Baldwin considered first team?
That is what we refer to in the motion picture industry. That is what we refer to the cast as first team.
Okay. So when the shot's being set up, is first team usually there?
No.
Okay. They don't come in until it's ready to shoot.
Yes,
I
mean
ready to film.
There are occasions that we might have shot a shot with cast, and now we're going to do it at a different angle and do lighting, and they might stay there.
Okay.
It just depends on the amount of time that would
Okay.
be needed to prepare the shot. But Mr. Baldwin was not present at that time.
So on October 21st after lunch, they're setting up the shot. Do you recall who was in the church?
I do.
Go ahead and tell us who you recall being there.
Ms. Hutchins, Joel Souza, Serge Setnoy, Ross.
Did you say Serge Svetnoy?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Ross Adiego, Reese Price, Thomas Gandy, Roman Gandy. This is during preparation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is pre Mr. Baldwin arriving on set. I believe the microphone boom operator Zach Sneeby might have been in the room in the church at that time.
Was Ms. Mitchell in the church at that time or not yet?
I don't recall seeing her there at that time.
Okay.
You know what? Mr. Souza would not have been. I don't think he was in the church during the preparation time.
So, at what point in time do you have contact with Ms. Gutierrez?
When Mr. Baldwin was called to set, when he arrived on the set.
Who called Mr. Baldwin to set?
I did.
Did you, at the same time, make any request for the armor or armor services?
I did not.
Did you ask for the gun?
I did not ask for the gun
And why wouldn't you have asked for the gun?
because it's normal procedure on certainly all of the productions that I've worked on with firearms. And it's not just for firearms, it's for props and wardrobe that when first team is called to set, it's announced over a walkie-talkie. The first assistant director would go on to the walkie-talkie and say, "Camera is ready, first team, please." This alerts all the different departments. Certainly costumes, because they're going to need to do whatever, put a piece of costume on the actor, make adjustments. Hair and makeup, they're going to need to do their touches. Props, they're going to need to give the prop that's needed to the actor. And this is also a signal, a cue to the armor that the actor that needs the firearm is going to be on set, and I should be there. The armor, I should be there to give the gun to the actor.
Okay, so you didn't actually call for the gun, but you agree that Ms. Gutierrez may have understood that it would be time for her to come into the church.
Yes.
I figure her question, but please, we're going to disregard the question asked. All right, thank you.
And my apologies. Just to be clear, you don't know what Ms. Gutierrez thought or why she did what she did in that moment, correct? You don't know that Ms. Gutierrez thought to herself, "I better come into the church." You're making that assumption, correct?
I'm making that assumption.
Okay. But to be clear, you did not call for the gun.
No.
Okay. Does Ms. Gutierrez appear in the church?
Yes, very shortly after Mr. Baldwin appeared on set.
Okay, go ahead and kind of walk us through this. Tell us about when Mr. Baldwin appears in the church and then Ms. Gutierrez, and walk us through what happens.
Mr. Baldwin entered the church. He took his position where he was needed in the pew of the church. I'm standing in front of Mr. Baldwin, facing Mr. Baldwin. It was no more than 5 feet from him. I was a body width to what would be his left. And Ms. Gutierrez appeared on my left-hand side with the revolver, and she said, let's do the gun check. She opened up the latch to show the drum of the revolver. She rotated the cylinder. It was empty. Checked the barrel. Well, it was what is referred to as a cold gun. And Ms. Gutierrez just took a few steps and gave the gun to Mr. Baldwin.
Now, it's your recollection at that point in time that the gun was empty, it did not have dummies in it?
Absolutely, it was empty.
Okay. And you looked at it, correct?
I looked at it, yes.
Now, let me stop for a moment. Were there any opportunity, at any point in time during that day, did you sit in for Mr. Baldwin?
I did.
When was that?
After lunch.
Okay. And when you sat in for Mr. Baldwin, was the firearm in the church?
No.
Okay. So why don't we talk a little bit about that? Why are you sitting in for him? Explain to the jury how that happens.
Well, usually there is a stand-in for the actor, a person, and most times it's a person that matches the height and hair color, look of the actor. There was a stand-in for Mr. Baldwin, and when I entered the church after lunch, the stand-in for Mr. Baldwin was there. And because of COVID, I wanted to keep the amount of people in the church to and I typically do that anyway. outside of the pandemic, before the pandemic, it just in smaller spaces, I would try to keep. What I usually say is, if you don't have to be there, please don't. So, because of COVID and just generally, I'd like to keep only the people that are needed for the shot there. I said, his name was Bill. I said, Bill, it's okay. I can sit in for Alec, and it was a good opportunity. Just as if I'm sitting in the pew right now, I can observe everything, the crew preparing, and that's what I did.
Did you need to have a firearm at that point in time?
I did not. No.
Did you have a firearm at that point in time?
No, I did not.
Were you using anything to mimic a firearm?
I recall holding up my hand like this as a finger.
Just so that they could set up the shot?
Yeah.
Okay. So after the setting up of the shot, after you sitting in for Mr. Baldwin, just to be clear, it's your recollection that Mr. Baldwin came in and Ms. Gutierrez came in around the same time?
Yes.
Okay. She does the gun check with you. You see an empty gun. To your recollection, Ms. Gutierrez hands the gun to Mr. Baldwin. Is that right?
That's correct.
What happens after that? How do we end up with a gun that is no longer empty?
I did not see the gun taken away from Mr. Baldwin. I'm still in the same position, facing him, body width to his left, no more than 5 feet in front of him. You know, as an assistant director, you're looking around, you're observing, you're communicating with people. I did not see Ms. Gutierrez take the gun from Mr. Baldwin, but she appeared back on my left-hand side, and she said that she had put dummy rounds into the revolver.
And at that point in time, was another safety check done?
She opened up the latch to the revolver. I recall seeing 3 to 4 what I believe to be dummy rounds. I had seen the dummy rounds before.
And when you say you saw them before, are you talking about that day or?
Before that day.
Okay, and let me ask you, under what circumstances would you have seen the dummy rounds if the only other time that guns were dummied up was a rifle?
Yes, and I believe on that day I did see those dummy rounds on her cart.
Okay, so you were familiar with what they looked like?
They had a very distinctive, bright brass end to it. What would be the end of the bottom of the shell casing, and all the primers were depressed, meaning that this has already been a bullet that has been fired. And,
but sir, let me ask you, you indicated that you only saw 3 or 4, you didn't see 6.
I don't recall her fully rotating the cylinder.
Okay. You don't recall her fully rotating it?
I do not.
Okay. And even though the cylinder wasn't fully rotated, did you let that safety check sort of pass?
I did.
Okay. And what's your recollection about what happened to the gun after that?
She took a few steps to Mr. Baldwin and gave Ms. Baldwin the gun.
Okay. And let me ask you, sir, were you criminally charged in this case?
I was.
And did you enter a no contest plea to negligent use of a firearm?
I did.
And why did you do that? When I say why, what in your mind caused you to be, what caused a plea to negligent use of a firearm to be appropriate? What did you do that would justify that?
I was negligent in checking the gun properly.
Okay, that's the reason that you took that plea, is that right?
That's correct.
So, to the best of your recollection, Ms. Gutierrez hands the gun to Mr. Baldwin. Walk us through what happens after that.
The revolver is placed. Mr. Baldwin had a holster. That the gun was basically at his chest, and his action was to take the gun out and point it at what had been the two U.S. Marshals, and he was pulling it out. I'm sure he was getting used to that action. He was in communication with Ms. Hutchins about where to point the gun.
Do you recall, sir, was Mr. Souza also in the room?
He was.
Was Mr. Souza also participating in how to set up this shot? Do you recall?
No, I just recall that it was communication between Mr. Baldwin and Halyna.
Okay. And then what happened?
The gun went off.
When the gun went off, what did you think happened?
There's so many thoughts. Honestly, the idea that it was a live round of ammunition that went off was just not. It wasn't computing. It wasn't, and it was my thought was that a blank round had been loaded, and there had been another instance that an actor was killed from a blank round, and I just thought that there something in the blank round, a wadding. I had heard at one time that maybe they used pieces of wax to keep the black powder in the blank round, or was there an obstruction in the barrel? It just wasn't something I could compute in my mind.
Sir, after you heard the gun go off, tell us what you saw in terms of the reaction by Ms. Hutchins and Mr. Souza.
Ms. Hutchins is to my left, maybe 3 feet away. Yeah, it was my recollection that I might have been the first person to her. She was on the ground. Perhaps Ross Adiego might have been there, which would have made sense because he was the dolly grip, and he would have been close as anybody to Halyna.
Did you speak to Ms. Hutchins when you approached her?
I did.
What did you say?
Are you all right?
Did she respond?
Yes. She said, I can't feel my legs.
And when you're ready, just tell us what happened after that. Take a break if you need to.
I'm ready. I immediately left the church to make sure that 911 was being called. And the set medic appeared, and she was treating Ms. Hutchins, and I stayed out of the church just to keep space.
Do you know where the gun was in these moments after it went off? Was it, if you recall, was it left in the church? Was it taken out?
I had an assumption where the gun was. What was going through my mind, trying to determine what had happened. Again, the idea of what was in the gun that would do this to two people. still no ability to compute that a live round of ammunition would have been in that gun. And I said, in an effort to triage the situation, I need to know what's in that gun. I went back into the church. I went to the pew. On the pew was the revolver. I grabbed the revolver. I left the church. I went to Ms Gutierrez's cart, which is on, if you're facing the church, it would be on the left-hand side of the church, right just immediately around the corner. I took it to her and I said, I need you to unload that gun. I need to know what it's in it.
And did she unload the gun in front of you?
She did.
And what was taken out of the gun?
I recall seeing 5 dummy rounds, again with the distinctive bright brass ends to them, and 1 shell casing that did not have a projectile on it, and it had a completely distinctive looking end to it.
When you say a distinctive looking end to it, what are you referring to?
I recall it as being gray, metallic gray. And I recall that it was just completely different looking. It's hard to explain. There was some kind of machining or something. Maybe it was raised. This is my recollection, but a more contemporary looking bullet than what I was seeing in the other rounds.
And let me ask you, sir, do you own guns?
I do not.
Do you shoot guns?
No, I do not.
At any point in time in the afternoon, after lunch, did you tell Ms. Gutierrez to leave the church?
Can you say that question
Did you
again?
tell Ms. Gutierrez to leave the church?
No.
Did you realize that she had left the church?
I did not.
Did you have an expectation that the armorer would stay with the gun?
That wasn't in my head at the time.
Well, but let me ask you, just in terms of your experience working on movie sets with guns and armorers, in your experience, does the armorer hand off a gun and then walk away and leave?
That's not my experience.
Okay. At some point, did you realize that Ms. Gutierrez had not stayed in the church?
I did not realize she had not stayed in the church.
After the gun went off, where was she the next time you saw her?
At her cart.
Okay. And you just didn't know whether she was in the church or not?
I did not know.
Okay. Sir, did you instruct Ms. Gutierrez or request that Ms. Gutierrez put dummies in the gun?
I did not.
Did you hear anyone ask her to put dummies in the gun?
I did not.
Now, we understand that you entered into a plea agreement. Were you placed on unsupervised probation?
Yes.
And has that time period ended?
Yes.
Approximately when did it end?
I think sometime in October.
Okay. Are you under any legal requirement other than responding to a subpoena to come in here and testify?
No.
Why have you agreed to testify in this trial?
It's important to me that the truth be known. That Halyna's husband and son, her family, know the truth of what happened. It's important that the cast and the crew, producers of Rust, know what happened. And it's important that the industry, the motion picture and television industry, knows what happened so that this never happens again.
All right, thank you, sir. I'll pass the witness.
You know what? I think it's time for bathroom break. So please don't talk among yourselves or anyone else about the evidence received here in court. And we'll be back at about 2:35.
All right. May I approach?
Mr. Halls, I want to show you what's been entered as State's Exhibit 26. If you could take a look at that.
Yes.
And do you recognize that?
Yes, it looks very similar to the dummy rounds that I saw.
Okay. So that, and if I may show the jury here, this is State's Exhibit 26. Sir, you indicated that you indicated that resembled the round you were talking about?
It resembles the dummy rounds that I saw. The
Okay.
ends of the dummy rounds that I saw.
The 5 dummy rounds?
Yes, sir.
Does it resemble that 6th casing?
No.
Okay. So it looked even different than that. Than what we just saw. It didn't look like that.
It did not look like that.
Okay. Okay, we may come back to that, but I appreciate that explanation. Now let me ask you some preliminary questions about your background. How long have you been in the film industry?
I started in the film industry, I think, around 1985.
Okay. So, 30 years?
Yeah.
Or
Yes,
actually,
over.
40 years. My math is, let me see, 15, so almost 40.
From
40.
2021, I retired from the industry.
Okay, somewhere in there, almost 30 years.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you've been a first assistant director for quite some time. How many years have you done that?
Since the mid-90s, since about 1995.
How many films over the years have you worked as a first assistant director? Do you recall?
I don't have the
Okay.
number, really. I don't. It's
That's
over
okay.
20. It's over. It could be 30.
Okay. And how many have you worked on where there's been an armor? Approximately.
I'm sorry, sir. I would really have to sit down and look at my resume. For sure, 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not holding you to a number, but of those 10, those approximate 10, have you ever worked on a set where there's been a PartTime Armor?
No.
Okay. So Rust film was the first time you've ever been on a set involving somebody doing armor duties and something else. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Here you were aware that Ms. Gutierrez Reed was performing functions of armor and props assistant?
I was.
Okay. Now, sir, as I understand, you did not have any concerns during the Rust set about Ms. Gutierrez Reed's work.
I did not.
Did you believe that she was diligent in her checks of firearms on set?
I did.
Okay. When let's just give an example, there'd be a day where guns were going to be used and Ms. Gutierrez Reed was present as armor, would she ask you to do weapons checks with her?
Yes.
Okay. And sir, when she does a weapons check with you, is that to open and show you the barrel and make sure there's no barrel obstructions?
Yes.
And I think you described earlier that with the revolver, you could see down through it. The light goes through, you could see through the barrel.
Yes.
Okay. Now, do you also recall Ms. Gutierrez Reed had a tool to push down the barrel to make sure there's no obstructions?
I don't recall seeing
Okay.
that tool.
But would you describe her as very diligent in that process when there was a weapons check required, that she would do that with you?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know of any instance before the 21st where she did not do those weapons checks when they need to be done with you?
None whatsoever.
Okay. I know that you would have safety meetings. Now, would you have those every day of the set?
We did not have them every day.
Okay. And I know sometimes, do you recall getting emails that people wanted to have safety meetings?
Yes.
Okay. And at one of the safety meetings, do you remember Ms. Gutierrez Reed helping you with a presentation as part of the briefing?
On day one, the first day, yes.
Okay, sir. And what did you think about her presentation regarding the gun portion?
I was very impressed with how she took control of the situation and was very clear and very instructive and communicated everything very clearly and confidently.
Okay, and confidently. In your experience, having observed armors in 10 other films, did she come across as seeming competent in what she was doing?
She did.
And did she come across as seeming knowledgeable about firearms?
She did.
Okay. You said that was the first day. Do you recall there being a training for a gun training specifically for the actors and crew?
Before the shooting schedule started, there was a day devoted to Ms. Gutierrez training actors.
Okay, sir. And were you present at that?
I was.
And what was your impression of that training?
Impressed. She was confident. There were some male actors, and she didn't seem to be intimidated by them, and I felt that they respected her.
Did you participate in that training?
I was just an observer.
Okay. So, in the time that you saw her doing armor duties, you didn't have any complaints about her?
No.
Okay. Now, Mr. Halls, you know that she was also doing props duties. Did you ever witness her doing specific props duties, like rolling cowboy cigarettes or propping up actors?
I recall seeing her helping in propping up actors. Yes.
Okay. We saw some videos earlier today of some of the scenes, and it looked like there was fairly gun-heavy scenes at times, and so there would be a lot of people walking around, some people holding weapons. Do you recall that?
Yes, there were. Yes.
Okay. Now, there were a couple instances where it appeared that muzzles of weapons were getting traced across people. Now, do you recall anything like that?
Can you clarify?
Sure. There was some testimony, and some videos where, for example, a stuntman was holding a weapon, and he was kind of turning around, and it was coming across the muzzle across other people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall anything like that?
I don't recall anything.
Okay. Some of those, it appeared you were present on the videos. But do you remember any instances where you felt like there was an unsafe condition with the way people were pointing their muzzles?
I did not.
Now,
if I did, it was part of my practice that I always, I would say, please point the gun away. If their action as an actor was to point it at another actor, I would say, please, especially live fire situations, please make sure you're pointing the gun away from that actor.
So your habit in practice was, if you saw something like that, you would tell them, please point that gun a different direction.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Now, we saw another video where it appeared Mr. Baldwin was running out of a shack or a structure, and the cameras are panning over, and he's shooting as he's coming out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a camera, and it's a blank. They're shooting blanks out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall that scene?
I do.
Okay. Do you recall that the cameras were sort of right in front of Mr. Baldwin as he's coming out and shooting?
I do.
Do you remember having any concerns about the safety of that shot with Mr. Baldwin shooting a blank and the camera being right there. And we're not sure how many feet away, but it was.
There was a number of situations whenever there was a camera that needed to be close to a gun being fired with a blank. I would ask the operator, "Do you feel safe?" And I would suggest that they would put we call them Fernie pads, but they're basically a packing blanket that you would see when you're moving furniture or something. That typically, people can wear in that situation.
Okay, sir. So, and you had a lot of experience leading up to that movie, but when you saw something like that, you said your habit and practice was to talk to the person behind the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you remember a scene where it was actually that same scene where Mr. Baldwin ran up the hill with the child actor at the end of that scene, and there was a yell for cut, and then Mr. Baldwin shoots after the yell for cut, and he utters a cuss word? Do you remember that?
I only recall it because it was shown to me during a deposition in December.
Yes, sir. And I recall that was shown to you.
Yes, it was.
Now, your memory of that, did you at the time think that was a safety concern, that cut had been yelled and Mr. Baldwin shot after that directive?
I didn't register as a safety concern.
Okay. Did Mr. Baldwin at times direct people on those scenes, like the camera people, the armor? Did he sort of order people how he wanted to do it?
Again, this is recalling what was shown to me in the deposition, and he was clearly pointing a gun and asking the person that he was pointing the gun at in the direction to, please move.
Okay.
Move away from where he's pointing the gun.
Do you remember at times Mr. Baldwin rushing people to keep going, reload, let's go, let's go, let's go? Do you remember that?
Again, I was shown a video where Mr. Baldwin says, "Let's go." I don't characterize that as Mr. Baldwin rushing people.
Okay.
I think I characterize it as an actor in his moment. I'm ready. Okay, let's go. There was never any Mr. Baldwin rushing anybody.
Okay. So you never felt like Mr. Baldwin was rushing? Okay.
None whatsoever.
Okay. Now let me talk to you about, you became aware of 2 negligent discharges on set, did you not?
I did.
And do you remember those were approximately October 16th, 2021?
Approximately, yes.
Were you present and witness either of those incidents?
I was.
Which one or both?
Both.
Okay. At the time that you witnessed them, do you know then that one involved Sarah Zachary
Yes.
and the other involved a stunt double?
Yes, Blake.
Blake.
Yep.
Okay. What did you do in response to each of those safety incidents?
I didn't do anything. When Blake's long gun went off, I said, "What the F is going on in there?" And he replied, "It just went off."
Okay, and so you questioned him briefly. He said that the gun just went off. Did you ask him anything else about it?
I did not.
And how about with regard to Miss Zachary?
I did not.
Okay.
Say
Now, you know that that there is a thing called a production report.
I do.
And a production report is something that has the daily events, anything significant that happened that day. Is that right?
Yes.
Would that be something that ordinarily would be put into a production report?
It's such a rare situation. I couldn't answer you. I don't think it would be a normal thing.
Well, but whose responsibility would it be to make the production report?
It would be the second assistant director.
Okay. Would you have any responsibility to report that yourself?
I would.
And now, would this be something that you would consider noteworthy that maybe someone up the chain would want to know about?
At the time, it didn't seem to be noteworthy.
Okay.
It was just it happened. I don't know, other than don't do that again. I don't know really what else could be done.
Okay.
If we stop, call a meeting. Don't do that again. That's the only.
Did it ever occur to you that perhaps some additional training might have been warranted for those people that had the misfires, the negligent discharges?
No.
Why did it not occur to you that maybe they needed some more training, for example, on how to hold that hammer and prevent that from falling too quickly? Why did that not occur to you?
Well, for the stunt doubles case, I'm assuming that he was an experienced stunt person that had experience with firearms, and I guess I made an assumption that Sarah had some experience in training.
And what did you make that assumption on? That assumption?
Experience, just.
Okay. So, in response to those negligent discharges, there's nothing that happens. Now, did you become aware of another discharge by special effects? Were you aware of that?
No.
Okay.
I was not.
Did you? Are you aware of the safety bulletins put out by SAG?
I am.
And did you ever know that they were, or whether they were attached to the call sheets?
They were not.
Do you know who would attach those? Would that be you, if they were going to be attached?
It would be a member of my department that would do it.
Do you know why those safety bulletins were not attached?
It's not a requirement, written requirement.
Okay.
Some AD departments do it, some don't.
Now, the safety bulletin goes over the rules about firearm safety, doesn't it?
Yes.
And so that's something that, but you're saying that just varies, that some people do it, some don't?
Yes.
Okay. You talked earlier about when you would make an announcement that there would be gun usage or live fire with blanks, you had a wireless microphone.
I did.
Well, how did that work? Would that transmit through a radio or to other people, or you would just announce it on the microphone?
Often I would do it simultaneously pushed. I would have a little microphone lapel, it would be up here. And that's normally how I would communicate. It was never. No, I usually would do it by hand with the walkie-talkie, and I would. There were times where I would do it simultaneously with the wireless microphone in my walkie-talkie.
So, if you that wireless microphone, would it just transmit into the general area around you?
Yes.
And then if you do that at the same time as your walkie-talkie, did that effectively communicate through your radio with your microphone? I mean, did that have any issues with that?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. Now, what channel? I know there was different channels on that set. What channel would you normally communicate those announcements on?
Channel 1.
Channel 1. And do you know whether the armorers were always on channel 1 or if they had a different channel?
They better have been.
Well, and I'm not saying any given time. I'm not talking about a given moment at this point. I'm just asking you, did the armorers have another channel?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Sometimes the departments might designate another channel to go to for a private conversation. Typically, channel 2 is devoted just to if there's a longer conversation that needs to happen. People can go to channel 2.
Okay. And then props, did they have their own channel?
They're on channel 1.
Okay, channel 1 is props. Okay.
Yes.
On the day in question, on the 21st, you knew that Video Village was down?
Yes.
And can you tell... I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell the jury a little bit more about Video Village, just so they understand it? Where was this set up?
Video Village is basically what a pop-up tent that you would see at a party or an event. What are they, 10 by 10 or something like that? And then the sides would be blacked out so that no daylight could get into this what is the Video Village, where there's a monitor. In this case, it was a large monitor, for 42 inches LED flat screen monitor, and then that Video Village in the industry, that is referring to this place that the director of photography, the director, producers, the script supervisor can see the action, can see the shot being filmed on this monitor.
Now, ordinarily, if that were set up on that day, Ms. Hutchins and Mr. Souza would have been in that tent watching Video Village. Is that right, sir?
That's my feeling. Yeah.
And because the camera crew had walked out, or the next day, Video Village is not operational. Is that right?
That's my understanding. Yes.
Okay. And is that why ultimately there was kind of a change and people were inside the church?
That's my understanding of it. Yes.
Did you know on the day, on the 21st, that things were a couple hours behind?
Very well aware of it.
Yes, sir, and I know. Did that camera crew that walked off, did they come back that next day? The camera crew that walked off the day before, did they come back the next day?
They came back. I saw them there that morning to retrieve some of their personal items, I would think. Yeah.
Were you able to meet with the new camera crew that came that day?
Not until they first appeared on set with the camera. It took a while for them to get the camera built into set.
So this is literally, they're coming on that morning and they're building a camera into set.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, once they get that set up, things start rolling. Before lunch, you described that you're in the church with Mr. Baldwin. Is that right? There's other people in there, but you're in that church with Mr. Baldwin?
Yes. Yes.
Now, I think you said at some point Ms. Gutierrez Reed came in the church and she presented the revolver. Is that right?
We're talking about after lunch?
No, this is before lunch.
Yes, we did some scenes with Mr. Baldwin and the actor that was portraying his grandson.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was before lunch.
That was before lunch.
Did Ms. Gutierrez Reed bring that revolver before lunch?
Yes.
And was that when you said that she showed it to you and it was empty?
That was one of the occasions on that day that she showed me that the gun was empty. Yes.
Okay, so that was one of the occasions. What was the other occasion that she showed you it was empty?
After lunch.
Okay, so we start off before lunch, and the revolver is empty. Now, is he doing the same, Mr. Baldwin doing the same blocking scene?
It is not my recollection. I don't recall him doing that.
Okay.
That scene.
So it's a different type of scene, but in any event, there's an empty firearm. There's no rounds loaded in that. Is that right?
That's correct.
Was there any reason why a rubber or a replica gun wasn't used?
Is there any reason why a replica? Because it would look like a rubber gun.
Or was it a rehearsal or actual filming?
At what time period are we talking about, sir?
Before lunch.
I recall just the dialogue scene between Mr. Baldwin and the actor playing his grandson, and it was just the gun in his holster. Okay.
Do you not recall him, Mr. Baldwin, pulling that out before lunch?
I don't recall that before lunch.
Okay. Well, after lunch, you said that Ms. Gutierrez Reed brought the firearm back again, and you said initially you're saying that it was unloaded again.
Yes.
Did she again show you the barrels and check that gun with you?
I'm sorry. After lunch?
Yes.
Yes. She held the gun. Let's do the gun check. Just checked the barrel. Did a full rotation of the drum of the cylinder.
Okay.
How,
And then what? And then I think you said after that she walked over a few steps, and what you're saying is she handed the firearm to Mr. Baldwin. Is that
that's
right?
correct.
Now, you then say that you don't see her leave, right?
I recall seeing her walk past me. She gives the gun to Mr. Baldwin, turns, and walks away.
Where did she walk away to? Did you
She
see?
walked past me. I didn't see where she went.
You did not see her leave the church, though. Did you?
I did not.
But then you also testified that at some point she's back beside you with the firearm again, and it's got rounds in it. Is that right?
She told me that she put dummy rounds into the gun. Yes.
So, when you were near Mr. Baldwin, that church, does it have one entrance?
I believe so. Yeah, I think it's only there might be a door that I didn't see in the back where the altar would be, but certainly at the front of the church.
Front of the church.
Yeah.
So, and how big is that church?
Oh, 20 by 30, 20.
It's approximately 600 square feet, roughly.
I'll let you do that math, Mr. Bowles.
I could be wrong, but I think it's about 600 square feet. So within that,
It would be, the width would be from, pretty much from here to that wall, and then where we enter.
okay, so for the record, you're pointing with your left hand to the side of the judge's desk, to Her Honor's desk, and the wall on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And then from where you're seated to right behind counsel.
Yes.
Okay, where you come in. Okay. So that's about the size of the church. Now, you are sitting there fairly close to Mr. Baldwin, right?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
Standing there.
And then you say you don't see Ms. Gutierrez leave at all. Ms. Gutierrez Reed leave. And then she comes back with a firearm again. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you then state that she shows you what you believe are 3 or 4 rounds in the firearm.
Yes, sir.
And did she do that how did she do that?
I don't know if she did a full rotation. I don't recall a full rotation. My recollection is seeing 3 to 4 rounds.
So if she had done a full rotation, you would have seen every cylinder in that, right?
In retrospect, I would like to think I would have. Yes.
Because after everything happens, we know that you said it's unloaded and there's 5 dummies in 1 casing. So that's 6, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So is it possible that you did see every cylinder, or how do you reconcile that? There's 3 or 4 rounds before, but there's 6 rounds after.
Because there was not a full rotation of the cylinder to show me 6 rounds. Again, my recollection is only seeing 3 to 4.
But you don't recall whether that was a full rotation or not.
I don't recall if it was a full rotation or not. Yeah.
Now if that had not been, that would not be a full weapons check with you, correct?
I have stated that, yes.
Okay. But yet, you testified earlier, every time before this, since the start of the Rust filming, Ms. Gutierrez Reed always did a complete weapons check with you.
Yes.
So, you're saying that this time, for whatever reason, she abandoned her habit and everything she had done before, and you had praised her for doing a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow on this occasion, you're saying that there wasn't a full rotation. Is that right?
Yes.
Well, why didn't you say something? That I'd like to see all
Again,
this.
this is what I am admitting to, that I did an improper check of that firearm.
And so, after you admittedly do an improper check of the firearm, isn't it true that you handed that firearm to Mr. Baldwin?
It's not true.
Do you know that your account conflicts with Mr. Baldwin's?
I am aware of that.
And do you know that it conflicts with Ms. Gutierrez Reed?
I am aware of that, but however, in Mr. Baldwin's initial statement with Detective Hancock, a few hours after the incident on October 21st, when asked the question who handed him the gun, he said Hannah did, like she always did.
And after that, he changed and said you had handed it to him, right?
Yes.
Okay. Right after this happened, the shooting happened. Do you remember you were standing outside with Mr. Baldwin talking with him, kind of near a truck?
Yes, I do.
Do you recall what you all were talking about? Were you talking about the events and kind of how this could have happened? And
Yeah, yes.
so you were kind of discussing and kind of trying to remember with each other what had occurred. Is that fair?
Most of the discussion was what was it that entered their bodies? And I think to a person that was sequestered, that was the tone of the discussion. And certainly the discussions that I had with Mr. Baldwin, we were both, was it a blank? Was it just that idea of a live round, again, being on a film set was just uncomputable.
Was it inconceivable that there would be a live round on set?
Yes.
And in fact, I mean, did you ever dream that there would be a live round? And you're thinking, talking to Mr. Baldwin, did you have any thought of that?
Honestly, no.
Okay. Yeah. Now, after you all talked, Mr. Baldwin, did you talk with him again after the shooting and after that day, the 21st?
No.
Okay. If at the moment that this had happened, I know you indicate that Ms. Gutierrez Reed gave him the firearm, but if you had provided him the firearm, which you're denying, I know, you're saying that didn't happen. If that had happened, and Ms. Gutierrez Reed were not in the church at that moment, that would have been your responsibility under the safety bulletin to ensure the safe operation, right?
Can you state that again? Clarify.
That was pretty long. Under the safety bulletin, if the property master and armor are not present during a gun scene, and you are the person there, do you agree with me that the responsibility would then fall on the first assistant director in a general scene for safety?
I don't recall seeing any language about the assistant director taking responsibility for the firearm if there is a prop master or armor not present.
Okay, sir, do you recall giving a deposition in this matter?
Yes.
Okay. And if I can just, before I get into that, I just want to kind of give you a few more details, see if you remember that under the safety advisory bulletin, that the first assistant director becomes the person responsible for maintaining and handling weapons if the property master and armor are not present. Do you recall that?
I don't recall that language.
Okay.
If you're saying it's there, and
Okay.
you can, yeah.
Well, do you recall being in this on page 121 at line 6? If you had known that Hannah, had you known that she wasn't in the church, meaning Hannah, under this guideline, would you perhaps be the individual responsible for maintaining and handling weapons? And your answer: if I knew that she was to be leaving the church, yes, it would. And knowing that the gun was cold, as I believed it to be, as she believed it to be, as Mr. Baldwin was told it was to be, yes, I would be that person. I have worked on productions where an actor would have a gun. Do you remember that portion?
Yes.
Okay. And there's one more portion you gave just for completeness. And you know, maybe the actor wasn't necessarily on set, and the prop master who was handling the guns, because there was no live fire, again, it's a prop. So the prop master is responsible for these guns. He would often say, not often, but there have been a couple occasions where I have to go to my cart, get something. Can you watch the gun? And I would watch the gun. Do you recall giving that answer, sir?
I do.
Okay. And does that refresh your memory that if you know that they're not present, that sometimes you may be responsible?
If I knew that they were not present, yes, I would be, I guess, the next one in line to be responsible, yeah.
Okay. And so your testimony is that you did not know that Hannah had left the church. So my question was, if that had occurred, if she had left the church and you had provided the gun to Baldwin, would you have been responsible? And I think what you said is you didn't know she left the church. Is that right?
I did not know that she left the church.
Okay. Do you recall checking that weapon, regardless of who handed it to Mr. Baldwin? Do you recall checking that weapon again by yourself?
I never checked that gun by myself.
Okay. Do you recall whether Mr. Baldwin checked that gun?
I do not recall.
Okay. Had you seen Mr. Baldwin retrieve a firearm before from Ms. Gutierrez Reed on another day?
Yes.
When you saw him before, did he check the weapon?
I don't recall.
Okay. Regarding when you and Ms. Gutierrez Reed unloaded that firearm, the revolver,
Mm-hmm.
You walked out, and I think he said you went to a cart on the left side of the church.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, do you recall that the prop cart at that point was near the black tent, or where that prop cart was?
Do I recall where the cart was?
Yes.
Yes.
Where?
Left-hand side, if you're standing in front of the church, looking at the front door, left-hand side, immediately around the corner. So if the front of the church is facing north, the left-hand side of the church would be facing east. It was just directly right around the corner. Yeah.
Do you recall that prop cart moved at some point after the police had arrived?
After the police arrived?
Yes.
Yes, I have a recollection of it being in a different location.
Did you ever see Miss Sarah Zachary, over by the prop cart after the shooting?
She was present when I asked Hannah to unload the gun, yes.
Did you see whether she was inspecting anything on the cart or touching any of the items on the cart?
I don't have a recollection of seeing her touch anything, but I do have a recollection of her making a comment that some of them don't shake.
Okay, so if she made that comment, then she must have been checking and shaking the rounds, right?
I would assume so, yeah.
Okay, did you witness that?
I did not see her actually shaking any rounds.
Okay. Did you see any other persons at that moment near the cart or at the cart?
No.
Okay.
I think I do remember Johnny. Can't pronounce his last name.
Ziello?
He was behind us. Yeah, I have a recollection of him being there.
Was that Johnny Ziello?
Yeah.
Okay. So he was there with you at or near the cart?
Near the cart. Yeah, I believe he was behind me.
Behind
I
you.
just have a recollection of seeing him there.
Okay. After the firearm, the revolver, was unloaded, did you get those rounds? You personally?
No, I never touched those rounds.
Okay. Do you remember whether Ms. Gutierrez Reed ever gave those to you after?
She did not give them to me.
Where did those rounds? Did she have them?
I just saw them as she unloaded the gun. They fell onto the cart, and that's my recollection of what ended up with those rounds.
Okay. And did you see anybody pick those up?
I did not.
Okay. Now, in this case, you indicated you had pled no contest, right?
Yes.
And you pled to a misdemeanor offense?
Yes, sir.
And you said that was negligent use of a firearm, correct?
Yes, sir.
You received a sentence of 6 months unsupervised probation, is that right?
Yes, sir.
So under the unsupervised probation, you did not have to report to a probation officer?
I did not.
And there was no conditions except not violating any laws, right?
I had to take a firearms safety class.
Okay. Did you complete that firearm safety course?
I did.
And so now you're off probation, and that's it, right? For
I'm just going to object to relevance. Oh, I'm sorry, Judge. Roach.
all right, Your Honor, may I have just a moment? Thank you. Sorry for that delay. One other question: when Ms. Gutierrez Reed was present in your presence, did you ever hear her call out blank sizes, for example, if they were going to be used a quarter load or a half load? Or
I do.
okay. And was she good about doing that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Rejoin.
Sir, I want to talk to you about the other instance that you recall where dummy rounds were used. I think you indicated they were in a rifle.
Yes.
Did you request dummy rounds be placed in the rifle?
No.
Did anyone else that you're aware of request?
I'm not aware of anyone else that
Okay.
requested the
Okay.
gun rounds.
Do you know why dummy rounds are used in revolvers?
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, if the shot is close up enough on the revolver, one, I don't think you necessarily need to have experience with a firearm, but one could detect that that gun is not loaded with any rounds. So that's the reason why we use dummy rounds. Cosmetic.
Because if the revolver is pointed at me, the dummies are in there so that you can see the projectiles inside the cylinder, right?
Correct.
Is that the same way that a rifle is set up?
No, but in this case, and just from recollection, I think there was something about that long gun that you could see that the rounds would be loaded. If this was the barrel of the gun, that the rounds would be loaded somewhere and it would be visible. Then
To the best of your recollection, was there actually filming of a scene that would show that part of that rifle?
Was there actually? It's only my speculation that it was a shot that was close up on that, close up enough on that long gun that Hannah made a decision that, to make this look correct, that dummy round should be in this.
Is that your recollection or is that your assumption?
She told me that and I saw her load the dummy rounds into the long gun.
Okay, but my question for you is, dummy rounds are put in guns because you're going to roll film, right?
Yes.
Do you have a specific recollection of there being a videotape of that rifle being loaded or unloaded or cycling?
No.
Okay.
I don't have a recollection of
Okay, thank you, sir.
that. There's no recollection of a shot of that rifle being loaded.
Okay. The entire time that you worked with Ms. Gutierrez on the set of Rust, do you have any recollection of ever seeing her shake a dummy round?
I do not.
On cross-examination, well, also on direct, you testified that the dummy rounds that you saw come out of the revolver after the incident had shiny brass primers. Is that right?
Well, if you want to get technical, right, it would be the end of the casing, which would have the primer in the center of that surface that's bright brass. Yes.
You understand what the primer of the casing is, correct?
I do.
And your recollection is that the dummy rounds that were taken out of the gun had shiny brass primers, right?
Yes.
And do you agree with me that State's Exhibit 26, and I'm happy to come closer to you.
Well, if you could, just
Okay,
for
well, let's do that. Let me show you State's Exhibit 26 again.
Yes.
Is that a shiny brass primer?
Honestly, my recollection is that they were a little bit more shinier than what you're showing me.
Well, hang on. Is that close enough for you? And I know I have old eyes also, so I sympathize with you.
I'm sorry. Are you calling me old? I am. That's all right.
Is that primer brass?
That primer does not appear to be brass.
Okay, thank you, sir. And let me ask you, when was the last time, well, you saw a spent casing come out of that revolver, correct?
I did.
When was the last time you saw that spent casing?
At the moment when I asked her to unload the gun.
On October 21st, 2021?
Yes.
All right. I just want to clear up a point that on cross-examination I was a little confused about. You indicated that Mr. Baldwin initially said that Hannah handed him the gun and then changed his story.
Yes.
Did he change his story, if you recall, during the interview with Detective Hancock on the 21st?
No.
Did he change it after that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know when the first time was that you realized that he had a different version of events?
It was shortly after when when Hannah made a statement that that I gave the gun to Baldwin.
I'm just wondering when that would have been.
I don't know. It was months, maybe.
Months after October.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Bowles asked you about the safety bulletins and that when the armorer isn't present, that the first assistant director is kind of in charge of guns, right?
Yes.
Is it your understanding that that safety bulletin contemplates the first assistant director being told that the armor is going to leave the area?
I don't. That's not in that document.
How are you supposed to know that she's left if you're not told that she's left?
Correct. I only know that she's left if she's telling me she's leaving or if I see her leave.
Okay. And as first assistant director, you have a lot of other responsibilities other than checking the gun and keeping an eye on the armor, don't you?
I do.
Objection.
Okay.
Is that right, Mr.?
I'm sorry?
Did you withdraw your objection?
He's already answered. So.
Okay.
Okay. And I don't have anything further. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. You're excused.